Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar called Art is a Technology for Understanding. I'm going to give it a second. Many more of you are joining, but we want to stay on time and we have a lot to go through today, so we'll dive right in. My name is Lily Barilovich. I'm the founder of FS, and we have a really exciting presentation for you. This is probably the first of its kind for FS. So we're excited to explore this version of a presentation. So before I dive in, I just want to introduce some of the speakers that are going to be joining me today. So we have Lottie Lessenberg-Smith joining us from theVOV, our partner in this presentation. She's a co-founder, co-creator of theVOV. And then we have amazing speakers from the FS team, Melissa Moylan, who's our VP of Women's Wear. We have Carrera Koenig, who leads our culture section. And we have Anya Sumser, who leads our content and the kids section. So today, this presentation is very different than anything we've done before. A few months ago, I mean, it feels like yesterday, but it's been a long time. I met one of the co-creators of theVOV, which Lottie will tell you a lot more about when she joins us in the conversation. But it's an amazing platform that put together 15 UK institutions on a digital platform. It was their way of allowing people to experience art across the globe, just as we were all heading into our pandemic reality. No one of us could visit any gallery or museum. And their goal was, let's support artists and institutions by putting together a digital experience, which is all done in VR technology, which you'll experience a little bit of today. But I can't say enough about it. All of you will have to join and actually get into the platform to experience it fully. And Sarah will soon put a link for you so you can explore on your own. We'll be showing little pieces today, but the full experience is available through theVOV. So please log in and experience it. So the idea was, how could we have everyone experience art and enjoy art? And for us, what was interesting about this opportunity is art has always been a realm or an area we look to for answers when we're questioning the future, we're questioning what's to come, and supporting our audience with futuristic understanding or any kind of confirmation of any topics that we're currently exploring. Art and artists are always the first voices we look at. It's always been a point of inspiration for us, and for all of you that are FS clients, you know that we use art and influencers in many of our reports. So this was an opportunity to use the actual artists and artist exhibitions that are exposed and presented on theVOV to validate and also to create a new point of view for some of the big conversations we're having on FS, some of the macro conversations. And we truly believe at a time when, uncertainty and all of us have some big questions, we need to look elsewhere. We need to look elsewhere for answers. We need to look elsewhere for inspiration. So yes, a lot of these exhibits are inspiring just for us creatives as inspiration. And I highly encourage you to look at all of them. The material that's provided for every institution is so incredible and so inspiring. The visuals are really inspiring. So as a creator, just for that is worth visiting, but also to get the point of view from the artist and the exhibit that they put together on explaining some of the conversations that we're questioning today. So we picked three. The self, our community, and the planet. Those are big topics, ones that we're diving in and exploring from every angle on FS. And today, what the team is going to do is break down each of them, tell you a little bit about the questions we're asking in each of these big macros. And then we've selected an exhibit from the 15 offered on theVOV to actually give us the artist's perspective of how can we understand it better, an angle that we might not have gotten if we didn't experience this art experience. So as you see here, we've done the connections, but you will discover more as we go through the presentation. So for the self, we chose the Sarah Band exhibit called Corpus Mentis for our community, we chose Spike Island, and that was an amazing exhibit by Basira Abad, Life in the Margins, and just that title got me alone. And for the planet, we chose Cape Patterson, a place that only exists in the moonlight, which is also incredible, which you guys will get a little peek into today. So I'm going to just introduce Loti for a quick intro to just add anything that I might have missed on the VOV. So Loti, first of all, welcome. And thank you for joining us today. We're so happy to have you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for that lovely introduction. You definitely encompassed a lot of the VOV. If I explain a little bit more, we are the brainchild of Visualogical, an arts science collective, and Outset Contemporary Art Fund, which is an arts funding charity. And the VOV came from a real desire to make art accessible for everyone, anywhere. And that's really the guiding principle behind us. And as Lee mentioned, we were accelerated by the pandemic and that not being able to go into galleries and museums, which I think, I mean, a lot of what you see here now is created on our bedroom floors, but it's definitely something that's here to stay long after the pandemic. And for season 1, whilst we've just got 15 UK leading exhibitions, we are going to then go international for season 2. And already we have such a wide range for everyone to get stuck into, from Andreas Gursky at the Hayward Gallery to a huge group show exhibition called Collective Intimacy with the Showroom. And yeah, I'm hoping that everyone's really enjoying it so far. We're midway through, so all the exhibitions are currently live together, and they'll be coming down in 3s, and then we'll have one final week where they're all back live together, which we're very excited about.
That's awesome. I mean, a lot has happened since we met the first time around and when you guys were concepting this idea, which, you know, is obviously super visionary, and just to get 15 institutions that not normally collaborate is a huge accomplishment on its own, and to create all the assets and have each gallery have a beautiful representation on Vortic is you know, miraculous. So congratulations on what you've
done
so far. And, you know, thank you for giving us the opportunity to dive in and explore art in this way, you know, in the way that really validates some of the bigger conversations that we're questioning. So I know we'll turn to you again for some more specific questions about each one of these macros, but I think let's dive in. Also, I just want to tell our audience, don't be shy to ask questions. We love it when you're vocal. I love you. Some of you are saying hello. Please say hello, share where you're from. You know, this digital reality allows us to gather many of you from across the globe, but we also feel really distant. So make use of the technology, say hello, tell us where you're from, ask questions, be in the conversations. We are gonna leave some time at the end for answering some of your questions, but please engage all the way through. We love to hear your voices, even if it is just on chat. You could just put it in chat, make sure it's to everyone, not just the panelists, and or not just to a specific person. And also you can do it in the Q&A, whatever you wish. Our team is here to filter through them, and we'll get to a few of them at the end, depending on how much time we have. So I will let Melissa Moylan dive into the first one, exploring the self. And of course, you know, we'll chime in when there's something else to be said. So Melissa, go ahead.
Thanks, Lily. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Moylan, VP of Women's at Fashion Snoops. It is honestly my real pleasure to introduce the macro called the self to you. We associated this one with a Sarabande exhibit called Corpus Mentis. And I think I'll just speak generally about that before getting into the macros. It's a group show of female artists. It's co-curated by Hikari Yokoyama, as well as Trino Vericade. And what I found fascinating here is that each artist really leveraged the body as a starting point from the perspective of cultural history, as well as physical vulnerabilities. Also the body as a site of healing and digital fantasy, which I think is interesting and has to be brought into the context. As we consider that cultural aspect of it, the body as an object just embodies this set of beliefs that really truly forms our identity, as well as our cultures and race. When we look to the self, we are looking into the process of making art in a lot of cases. We're reaching this deeper understanding about who we are, as well as who we want to become, especially in that context of digital innovation. Something that I think is especially relevant here is when we look at just the words corpus mentis, it's Latin for body and mind. And I think that's really pertinent to this moment that we're living in. The pandemic just brought about the realization to our minds and bodies as sanctuaries. I think we're entering this age of introspection where we're becoming much more mindful. We're much more into self-care as well as mental health awareness. And now we'll just refer to a quote. We felt really inspired by this. It was from Louise Bourgeois. She's a French-American artist. And she said, "Art is restoration. The idea is to repair the damages that are inflicted in life, to make something that is fragmented, which is what fear and anxiety do to a person, into something whole." So we thought we'd kick it off that way. And now we'll step into our macros in a little more depth, and I'll make some connections with some of the artists that participated in the show. So the first one that I'd like to draw to your attention is just this notion of growing. We're stepping outside of our comfort zones finally. We're learning the hard lessons, and we're kind of uncovering these different layers of ourselves. So with that in mind, Shannon Bono is one of the artists that we featured at the Sarabande exhibit. She describes herself as an Afro-femcentrist, which she says is a consciousness that asserts race, sex, and art as a way of living. We'll look into some of her artworks in the coming video that we've put together. But what she does is she presents these portraits of Black bodies that are woven through with cellular biology, such as Dutch wax fabrics. And she makes kind of those backgrounds come to the surface to highlight the intersection of both science and social culture. The age of introspection, I had kind of mentioned that we're upon this age of mass awakening of self-awareness through finally looking inward. Identity becomes a huge pillar here. And we're really feeling this one to our core. We're seeing our identity as fluid as well as experimental. And a couple of the artists that align with this in particular, we have Sian Fan, who's a performative artist and uses just the movement of the body to break into this digital space. There are a lot of glitchy kind of notions to heighten the boundaries both between real and digital. And that's also kind of interesting as we lead into another artist, Aro Barros. You may have heard of them. They're a digital fashion brand, and they allow you to kind of wipe free from your physical body and take on a digital form and build this whole new life. They allow you to create these digital avatars. And also what's really inspiring about them is that you're walking through a space and it's almost like this natural world inspired. It's like this whole other beautiful territory. Something else really interesting about those, especially for those of you joining on the fashion spectrum, is that Aro Barros will be showing at London Fashion Week's Discovery Lab. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. Something else that we've considered here is self-sanctuary and just, finding security within ourselves, especially after we've been quarantined for so long. Self-sanctuary just serving as this sacred haven from outside influences. We manifest that in a lot of different ways. It's kind of interesting to make this connection to social media and trends that we've seen on TikTok, where we're seeing techniques such as positive thinking and affirmations take hold, especially for the younger generations. One of the artists that we featured here, Katie Roberts Woods, she's a fashion designer, and she really believes in process-based work that relies on the behavior of fabric. So we'll see a lot of, it kind of looks like they're living, but very delicate fabrics such as tulle or silk, and her creations almost appear biotic. And so they're led by their own genetic order and kind of nuances to flow. We are also obviously increasingly aware of our own bodies in the present moment. We're making a very conscious connection to the mind and body. And one of the artists here that we explore is Christina Walsh. Very interestingly, she is a prosthetic designer, and she makes these sculptures of prosthetics that are actually meant to be performed. So it becomes all the more interesting to look actually into her background. She was a competitive swimmer and driven by this physicality of the body and performance, which I thought was really beautiful. And then finally, with mindfulness, something else that we're all tapped into, hopefully, we're beginning to really just live in this state of being active and attention in the present, learning about what it means to be fully human. And there was an artist that we featured here at Saraband, Paloma Tendero. She creates these beautiful series of photographs that just kind of constructs these craft-like things, such as threads that become veins or crochet that becomes a nervous system. And she does it in a sense of series. So it kind of is meant to reflect the ebbs and flows of time. Now we're going to go over to the video where we'll explore some of the works in the exhibit.
The thing that was really interesting to me is that all of these artists are really, really interested in the body. So their practice involves either working literally on the body or with the ideas of the body or how the body is used in culture or how certain types of bodies have different kinds of representation or what the body can symbolize. So again, so many different practices, but that was like the red thread that we were able to pull together to unify and create a vision that allows you to explore their works.
All right, so now we're going to bring Lottie back in and we'll address the self as well as the Saraband exhibit. Lottie, could you give us a little bit more context about the exhibit and why you chose to highlight this work on the VOV?
Sure. So I think, as you mentioned, like the exhibition is incredibly focused on the body, and it goes almost beyond a focus. It's an obsession. It's really goes very deep into that as just a theme, but also kind of brings in the way that digital spaces can be incredibly lonely. And I think that's why it's very important to have the presence of a body and to have that theme and to really dissect it and go in. And I think that's something as well that on the VOV we're very interested in, is when we were first starting out, we didn't want to just create kind of images on a wall and move on. We wanted to have something which made people feel like they were together when they were apart. And I think that the theme and the way that this exhibition has been created and curated even, really, you feel the presence of the body when you go into the corpus mentis. And I think as well, you could see in that video just there that the kind of floral background that you can see through the windows as well just now is actually an artwork itself by Sean Fan. And I really love how it's visible beyond the works of the virtual gallery space. And it reminds us that it's not just about the physical body, but also all the societal pressures and contexts that are coming in from the outside and putting pressure on, especially the female body, which is really explored here. So I quite like that. I think it's quite meta that there's this kind of inner cubicle, this inner sanctuary where all these other different themes going on. And it is an incredibly diverse range of artists, and they've all got different practices. They all do have an art science background though, which I find particularly interesting. But then you're surrounded by this other artwork, which has also got those themes running through it as well.
Fantastic. I think it's so beautiful to walk through this exhibit in particular and just see the different ways that the artists have interpreted the body, and then in hindsight, the self, and kind of the mindfulness that goes into that, and the connection, you know, also into those digital realms. I think is just fascinating. I also wanted to ask you, how do you feel that, you know, this particular exhibit, this is the only one that we're featuring today that features a group show. So how does viewing these multiple artist interpretations of the body just impact the viewer and impact their own sense of identity?
That's a great question. I think in terms of that multiplicity, I think that's really important because in my opinion, the self is actually a very communal feeling, because each feeling of the self is so different. It's very particular to yourself, but it's also an incredibly like impacted and fed upon thing by external factors. And I think that these multiple artist interpretations remind you as well how different everyone is, but how incredibly similar. And I really love how some of the artists are exploring the visceral nature of the body, so that you kind of feel those sinews and the very skeletal mechanics of how muscles move in Paloma Tendero's and then Christina Walsh's works, to the way that we dress the body, so there's external factors with Ouroboros. And so, yeah, I think that then obviously art is just such an incredible tool for making you introspect. So I think in that way, it kind of makes you think about your own sense of identity, definitely.
That's fantastic. I feel like I'm in such introspective myself now and awareness, just having seen this particular exhibit and how they explore it differently. I think for time, since we still have two others to go through, we'll move to the next one.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Carrera. I'm the Director of Culture at Fashion Snoops, and I will be walking you through our macro art community and really tying it back to how technology can be used to understand our role in our communities, the interdependent nature that we all have to embrace if we seek to work together in the future and come out of this pandemic moment stronger than ever. And we especially want to think here about the ways in which our communities and institutions can be more welcoming to others and really expand our ideas of communities so that we can grant access to people who we might not have generally considered. For this macro, we will be relating it back to the artwork Life in the Margins by Pasita Abad, which was brought to us by the institution Spike Island. So with that, I'll just reference this quote here that is by the American actor, writer, and activist. And he says, any form of art is a form of power. It has impact, it can affect change, it can not only move us, it can make us move. So we thought this was a really powerful idea to reference in terms of community, in terms of creating the communities we want to serve us in the future and come out of this moment again, just stronger than ever. On this next slide, we'll just be speaking to just general large topics of conversation in the realm of community and a lot of the different realizations that we've come to as a result of the pandemic era. I think most importantly is this idea of community care and this understanding that we are only as strong or as healthy as those around us, and that we really do have a duty to take care of those in our immediate surroundings. Another important, of course, conversation that happened was this realization around racial oppression. The need for equity, diversity, and inclusion came to the foreground this year. Unlike any year prior, it became so urgent, or at least, you know, these screams and these cries that maybe had been muffled before really broke into the fore. And we said, no, this is the time. This is the year that we do something about it. This is the year that communities rise to help in creating more equitable institutions. We also thought about colonization more than ever this year, and how we can make amends and heal our divisions and really consider our histories to create and counteract the effects of colonization and create, you know, more balanced and equitable structures in the future. Another really interesting conversation, especially online, is this idea of gatekeeping. And gatekeeping is the practice of holding back cultures from other people, keeping the secrets of your niche group and guarding them from other people, ensuring that other people can't join. And we've been seeing this across all different fields, whether it be, you know, the gatekeeping of outdoor activities like hiking and rafting. You know, these outdoor activities are so whitewashed. There's high costs and barriers to entry. We're also seeing it in the realms of photography. You know, a lot of maybe artists don't want to share their secrets on how to book an agent or a gig or where to get your film developed, because these are secrets that they want to keep for themselves. And even in the realm of art institutions and who gets to be a part of the community of the art institution, has really been these large conversations that have been happening this year. So with this macro, we really want to understand and create a greater sense of belonging and communality, to understand that what makes us similar is so much more powerful than what makes us different. So with that, I will play the video we have prepared by the artist Pasita Abad. When looking at the plethora of exhibitions that theVOV hosted, nowhere is this questioning of community more clear in the work of Pasita Abad. That's why we chose her, and specifically her work, Life in the Margins. So as I play this video, I'd like you all to think about these cultural questions that Pasita asks in her work, particularly around multicultural identity and the symphony of culture we celebrate today, as well as what makes someone American or European who belongs to a culture, and what does it mean for culture to belong to us.
My name is Pio Abad. I'm an artist. I'm the co-curator of the exhibition Pasita Abad Life in the Margins here at Spike Island. And crucially, I'm also Pasita Abad's nephew. Pasita Abad was a Filipino-American artist who was known for her trapunto paintings. This was a way of making that she started experimenting with in the late 70s, and it involved numerous processes layered together on a single surface. Her painted canvases are quilted, embroidered, and embellished with a wide variety of materials, from seashells to sequins, to ribbons, to buttons, even to plastic fruit. Her own experiences as an immigrant and her encounters with other immigrants of color led to the creation of her Immigrant Experience series in the early 90s. Unlike her early abstractions, these works were heavily informed by social realism and depicted the lived experiences of the many people she encountered, from Korean grocers to Cambodian refugees to Dominican house painters. LA Liberty is exemplary of this series. This work reimagines the Statue of Liberty as a woman of color to create a more inclusive representation of immigration in the United States. It seems that we're facing similar questions today. What does it mean to be multicultural? Who is considered marginal? And what forgotten stories need telling?
All right, so with that, I'd love to bring Lottie back to answer a few questions about this exhibit. Particularly, Lottie, tell us a bit more about why you chose this to highlight this work for the theVOV platform.
So as we just saw, the exhibition is about Pasita Abad, who is a Filipino artist, an incredible woman and passionate activist who made these large-scale Trinto weight paintings and works on fabric. And a fact that I actually love about her, which was told by Pio Abad, who's her nephew, who we just saw there, and who helped curate the show at Spike Island and on theVOV. He said in one of our lunchtime tours that he was doing that she was given the 10 Outstanding Young Men Award for art in the Philippines in 1984, which then after obviously she was given that became the Outstanding Young Persons. So she's been making waves for a while. And as an artist, I feel like she's very, very present. There are definitely these pieces of her in the artworks of the beads and the jewels sewn on. And on the theVOV's depiction, we focus very specifically on her depiction of the immigrant experience. So that sense of place and community and home, which I think really is bringing in those wider themes, which you mentioned just then.
Yeah, I think that video in particular really leaves us with some amazing questions to ponder of who belongs where and what does it mean to live life on the margins of a culture. Really powerful stuff. My next question for you is, when you were creating the theVOV in general as a project, as an idea, how important was the idea of accessibility and opening up the art institution to new audiences who may not be particularly in the art world?
Yeah, so the idea of community is what really powered us, and that concept of access for all. And in that we mean that in a myriad of different strands. So there's also like the first one to think of is the geographical inequality. So if you're someone who lives very far away, we all know that the art world is quite London-centric, in the UK at least, that kind of breaks down that barrier immediately. And then also, still staying within the digital realm, the architecture of museums is made to be incredibly intimidating. It is something that makes you feel, at least definitely for me, when you walk up, some buildings almost look like banks. They're incredibly like academically intimidating as well. And I think in having this online, it definitely breaks down that barrier. It breaks down that physical barrier, because I really hope as well that it makes anyone feel like they have the access and the opportunity to understand, and that it's not just for a select few of people. And I think as well, by everything not being behind a paywall, so anyone can go and look at this for free. It's just donations based, and as mentioned, those donations go to support the institutions, and it's split equally amongst all 15. And I think as well, these really interesting to go back to kind of why this concept of accessibility, and specifically why we wanted this exhibition, is that idea that art is belonging to everyone. And it's, especially in a digital space, we believe that is possible.
Yeah, I love that you bring up like the grandiosity and the intimidation of like these traditional art institutions, the big columns, and then the humbleness of being online, of being in your room or on your couch, and being able to access these exhibits. I feel like it does bring the art experience to so many other people. And for those listening in, you can go on after this exhibit and you can explore this exhibit in VR, in a VR situation, along with a plethora of other ones, and really feel like you're walking around in the exhibit, get more information about the different artists and their artworks, as well as additional resources of interviews with the curator. It's really a fantastic experience, and I really encourage you guys to dig further after even this this presentation is over. But with that, we conclude our community and we move into the planet, and I will hand it over to Anya.
Hi everyone, I'm Anya Summerhour, the Director of Content Strategy and Kids at FS. And as Carrera mentioned, we're going to be looking at the planet and how it can be used as a technology for understanding the planet, and how art can be used as a technology for understanding how we interact with it, to make sure we're not just taking nourishment from Mother Nature, but really sustaining her as well. In particular here, we're going to be looking at Katie Patterson's A Place That Only Exists in the Moonlight, that was shown at Turner Contemporary. I mean, even from the nature of that title, you can see how poetic and how interspersed we are with art in everything that we do. You can see kind of after the pandemic, we've been so trapped inside, how nature has, we're all longing to go back into nature. We're longing to revitalize ourselves outside. And Katie Patterson's pieces really call to mind our smallness, that feeling that we had during the pandemic, that we couldn't escape, we were stuck. But when we look at her pieces, we feel this great expanse around us and how we're just a little part of the universe and how that's our little portion of nature as well. We're looking at the fact that we can't just take from the planet, we need to revitalize, we need to really grow things, and we need to learn how we can bring everything together. I think we can really look to the words of the artist, Vasily Kandinsky, here as a great guide to that balance between the nature, between artist and nature. If the artist has outer and inner eyes for nature, nature rewards him by giving him inspiration. So throughout the millennia, we've been really looking at how art has been kind of that tool for technology all through the centuries. We looked at how cave paintings came from the most primitive of tools, putting art on the walls, looking at nature, pulling together those little pieces that surround us, animal drawings, everything. We've always strived to create something that shows where we're coming from and how we can understand it. So we're really looking at how our planet has kind of sustained us throughout the years, given us that feeling of everything is rooted in those beautiful traditions, rooted in that concept of we're coming together, we're using the resources we have around us. But we can't just take, and that's something we always struggle with, especially now as technology has driven us so much faster, so much more forward. We want everything now, we want it instantaneously. It's so easy to consume things without thinking of how we're taking things back and how we're returning everything to Mother Nature. So we're striving to look at how we can look to Indigenous artists as our guides. It's such a wonderful resource where we're looking to different places that we're not just pulling out, and we're instilling a sort of that reverence in our future generations. One of the works of Katie Patterson that I loved especially is the Future Library, where she planted a forest in Norway that's going to supply an anthology of books that's going to be printed in 100 years with unpublished works by prominent writers like Margaret Atwood. And I love that concept here because we're looking at how we're creating art for future generations while still giving back. We're still nourishing the planet while eventually we're going to borrow a little bit of it, but we're going to create it and we're sustaining and we're creating an ecosystem and a cycle where it's not just take and take and take, but it's nurturing the planet and giving it back. Something else that I really loved when we were looking at the exhibit, which as Kara mentioned, I highly recommend everyone take the time to go online and look at. The pieces by Katie Patterson are juxtaposed against those of J.M.W. Turner. And that's who the Turner Contemporary is named for. He's a noted painter of landscapes and marine scenes that lived in the 1800s. And one of the things that I find most fascinating is that one of his most prominent series of paintings was showcasing the change of light due to the volcanic eruption of Mount Tambora, showing how the high levels of volcanic ash really affected the sunsets in the year without a summer of 1816. So his paintings showcase that really unusual, vibrant sunset that was happening around the world, and especially in his backyard. And showing those paintings, looking at those paintings throughout history, all of the paintings that depict our everyday normal lives, of showing paintings of us just amongst nature, of how we interact with it, give artists and historians and scientists that ability to really understand where we came from and provide that added layer of context as to where we're going. And especially now, as we're looking into that next frontier, as we're looking into outer space, as we're looking into that kind of otherworldly element, we're looking into how we can enter that new world without destroying it, because we've seen the impact of ourselves on our current world. We've seen how damaging we can be. We've seen what we've done to the planet, how we've impacted it negatively, and we're suffering for it. Our climate has changed. We've had droughts in different places and floods in others. We're worried about rising sea levels. There's so much that has impacted us on this planet due to our neglect. So now we have this really wonderful opportunity of re-examining and making it better and looking to the other outer space that gives us a framework that we can build a new place in space without destroying it, to use the lessons we've learned to safekeep the future for our future generations as we explore the galleries. It gives us that needed context, that needed ability to understand where we came from in nature and on our planet, to understand where we can go. And I think the most beautiful way to show that is through Katie Patterson's exhibit. If we start the video on the next page, you can really look at how that beautiful relationship between art and science can really allow us to examine our place in the universe and our role in sustaining everything.
I always seem to be really curious about science, particularly astronomy and cosmology. They can help take your imagination almost to the outer limits because they're probing such enormously distant and vast expanses of space and time.
Katie's work is all about sensory experience, our experience of the elements of the material world, and that's also what Turner was about, that very physical experience of nature. Nowadays, the disciplines of art and science feel very much separate, and Katie is quite remarkable in the way that she kind of melds them together so truly.
I'm fascinated by Turner's work that relate to his moonscapes, glaciers and mountainscapes and rough terrains and rocks and strata.
All her artworks start as a very simple idea in her mind, and sometimes that turns into these incredible pieces which she undertakes enormous research in order to realise.
It's very much a collaborative practice, and that I would never be able to make any of these artworks without experts in their own fields, and so we kind of work together through that process and their ideas feed into the works. When members of the public come into the gallery, they can experience Turner's landscapes and then maybe at the same time listen to the sound that's been echoed from the moon, look at solar eclipses like dancing across Turner moonscapes, and all of those elements coming together at once. I'm hoping it'll be a kind of new experience for people.
So after seeing that beautiful video and that wonderful exhibition, Lottie, could you tell us a bit more about why theVOV chose to highlight this particular exhibit and artist?
Definitely. So she really inspired us a lot to dream big and to take our minds to a place that they'd never really been before. And I think because her practice is so heavily inspired by the natural world and science and astrology and cosmology, she really began to remind us that art and science are not as separate as we make them in the modern world. And I think that's something that really, really spoke to us. And especially because sustainability is something that's really important to us, and it's something that we also want to practice. And I also love that you mentioned Future Library, because that's a work that's also very close to my heart. I find all of her works actually incredibly emotive. But the artwork itself is kind of like a ticket. And I feel like it's so gorgeous to think that somewhere there is a manuscript which is going to be completely unread until the year 214. And at that point, it will have its own space in a special library in Oslo, and it will have completely been sustainable because the forest has been completely planted. I think it's 1,000 trees that were planted for this. And as well, another one of her works, which I think is worth mentioning, is it's actually taken the title of this exhibition is A Place That Exists Only in Moonlight. She has text-based works, and they're kind of like beautiful haikus. And in the exhibition online, you can actually see the metal on the walls and go through and read each one. And it's incredibly poetic, and it's really gives you a lot of moment for pause about how you yourself can react and be more sustainable as well. It gives you a lot of respect for the environment, I'll say that.
It's done really beautifully. Like you said, when you go through and you pause on each word, you have that moment of impact. You have that kind of feeling of what she's trying to convey. And like you said, you can even catch that glimpse of metal and have that moment of this is that feeling that she was trying to evoke in you and your sense of contextualization. And that is beautifully done on that exhibit wall when you're walking through it. It's an achievement. And I think that's something Katie Patterson also does so well. She kind of contextualizes our own place in the planet and how small and both large we are and how much of an impact we have. And one of my other favorite pieces of hers was when she installed a live phone line to an Icelandic glacier, which allowed people to dial in and hear it melting as they listened. And it got me to wondering, like, how does that merger of art and technology really allow us to examine our role in sustaining the planet?
So I think in general, art is a huge answer in the key to understanding and unlocking anything. It really is the best tool to communicate. And I think an image is more emotive than a statistic. And if someone were to tell you that X amount of glaciers have melted in the year, you would just not feel as compelled to act. You would not feel as like distraught than if you physically were listening to it and you had that sensory experience and you could see the image in front of you, what was happening and what is happening right now as we're speaking even now. So I think that that kind of real and long-standing change comes from emotion, and that resounding message in someone will definitely make them react. And I think, yeah, hearing that cracking, it's kind of like a call to action from the glacier itself. So I think it definitely pushes us, whether we like it or not, to examine our role in sustaining the planet. And she also, like, so technologically backed as well. She works with NASA. She really is backed in that way. So I think that definitely gives us a moment for pause and to examine our own role.
She's definitely a fascinating artist. Just when I was researching her, everything about her, all of her work, all of the science that she takes, she really does an incredible job of merging these two worlds that you would think would be so separate. And with that, I pass the baton back to Lily.
Thanks, everyone. I'm so inspired, and I've seen this presentation already. So first of all, yeah, this is just 3 out of 15. If you guys can wrap your minds around that reality, there's 15 exhibits to look through the VOV. We just shared 3 because we didn't want to keep you here with us for many, many hours. Lottie, you know, as we get some more questions in, I don't know how many we'll have time for, but I just want to ask you this general one. I know we're all re-emerging into real life again. And of course, this concept was created for our, digital reality. It was infused during COVID and when everybody couldn't exit or go to museums. What happens now? What's your vision for your concept as we re-emerge and start going into actual exhibits and museum? How does VOV have an opportunity to kind of take you further in there?
So we're very fidgetily minded. And what I mean when I say that is it's the combination of physical spaces and digital. So you can see in all of our spaces online right now, we're not seeking to replicate the actual gallery. We're not seeking to replicate that experience because we believe that it's something that actually can't be. What we're seeking to do is ameliorate and make better what is already there. So some of the spaces are intricately detailed and very similar to the actual gallery, but others are kind of fantastical, imaginative creations. And I think as we continue to move into the more physical from the digital, that digital element will never really go. And I think we're going to see a lot of that collaboration between these two kind of spheres. And what we're hoping as well, and what we are starting to begin, is having these QR codes within the physical galleries, which you can scan and go into the digital space so that each institution has their own digital wing. And I think as well, it's time to I think we really blame technology for a lot. I think it's time that we start using it for good. And I think the VOV definitely shows that. If I take Katie Patterson, for example, we look at one of her artworks, there is so much to discover, and scanning a QR code and having all these things coming up is going to be a really great way to help you understand and bolster that understanding, which, like a small placard on the side in a museum, can only get you so far. So in a short roundabout way, I guess that's how.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, and just for the logistical answer of all of us that are not in London would have never seen these exhibits if we didn't travel there. And
exactly.
For our creative community that's joining us today, we're really encouraging our audience to think outside of the box for, inspiration, not to just look at the same old things. And museums and art has always been a focal point for inspiration for us, but now you could access all of this from your desk, honestly. Now, it doesn't take away from you wanting to go to a physical exhibit, and you should, and there's so many amazing ones to discover, but having access that is so convenient, and I think the backstories, like, when I see an exhibit, I don't get to hear the voices of the artist, or not often, or what's behind the story of why they created it. And I think that the material you have provided there is
exactly,
really valuable.
There's a huge amount of collateral content, and of course we have all of our live events, which are now all on demand as well, to be watched back anytime. And in those, you get taken round by the artist. You get to have a Q&A with the artist. You get to have a Q&A with the director and the curator, and you never really get that experience when you're in the physical space. So I think that's really something that we're aiming to continue to do with the digital, that behind the scenes content.
Yeah, and everything gets to, and we're talking a lot about, collaboration. And I see a great, kind of comment from Sveti, who, just the idea how technology is democratizing the future and gives access to people and artists to be part of fashion and art that was impossible before. This idea of collaboration, like any entities or anything is possible right now through technology. And I know that fashion has always been inspired by art. I mean, Melissa can attest to the fact that this past runways, it's all was art inspired. There was so many art collaborations, and so many more are possible now. But outside of that, the inspiration of the layers that are available here is so valuable. I know for me as a creative, this inspires me, and it doesn't even need to be literal, like I got an answer to X. It's just, it moves you in some way, and it does provide answers that you will keep getting as you explore further and further. So team, anything that you want to add before we wrap up? I see a lot of questions are being answered on chat already. Thank you for doing that. Any last minute kind of wrap up thoughts or comments from you, Lottie, as well, as we thank our audience for joining us in this, almost experimental way to talk about our macros. I mean, we always make it really actionable, which I think this is actionable in a new way, stretching our mind to how we get the answer. Is what we're exploring. Where we look for answers is really important. How we get inspired is really important. So thank you for being with us in this incredible new way of exploring those answers. And I know that, season 1 was amazing, and season 2 will be even more amazing. And I know we'll do some great collaborations together as well as that emerges. And don't miss out on these exhibits. Everyone that joined, dig into them, explore further. So many layers to discover. We just showed you 3 today. So yeah, team or Lottie, any closing remarks from anyone before we complete and say goodbye?
Yeah, I had a question for Lottie. I know that a lot of as Lily was mentioning, that art inspires creativity, and a lot of people on the call are no doubt creatives. I was wondering if you had an idea of what art movement might take over post-pandemic, and what you think the art world will look like in the next year or 2.
I think I can definitely speak to what kind of themes we've seen on the exhibitions in the VOV, and they're definitely kind of nostalgia, connection, community. But I think in looking ahead to the future, like, people are famously unpredictable. So I think we'll see a huge shift away from that, looking back and looking to the future. And I think a huge part of that will be digital art. We've seen obviously the huge rise of NFTs, which everyone is so excited about. But I think that elements of those are definitely going to continue to shape how we view art, definitely, and that kind of what shape art takes as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, artists are always kind of the crystal ball of where culture is headed. I know in my work, we definitely, as leading the culture team, we definitely always look to see what opinions artists have in their work on where we're going, where we've been, and what the future holds. So definitely excited to see where season 2 goes, just even selfishly as insight into what we do at Fashion Snoops. But no, it's great having you on, Latu. Thank you so much for answering these questions for us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such an amazing discussion. I've really enjoyed myself, and I hope you all enjoy the VOV as well. But thank you so much. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, it's been an honor, and thank you. Thank you for joining us, all of you today. And all the links are in chat, so get in there and explore. And congratulations, Lottie and the VOV team. You guys have done an amazing job, and we're happy to collaborate with you. Thank you
so much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.